This story is about a love that defied the boundaries of family, time, and fate. A love whispered about in the forgotten corners of a small rural village, passed down from one generation to the next like a secret too painful to speak aloud. Though the names in this tale, Ayaan and Saira, are fictional, the events are said to have been drawn from a real story that unfolded decades ago in the quiet fields of Punjab, where honor often weighed heavier than the human heart. It is a story of two souls bound not by choice, but by circumstance, a stepbrother and stepsister who found in each other a reflection too deep to ignore and too forbidden to embrace. Their bond began in innocence and ended in silence. Yet the echoes of their love still linger in the wind that moves through the neem trees of Khadipur. Some say, on certain nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear a faint whistle drifting through the fields, a reminder that even when love is buried by time and shame, it never truly dies. The evening sun dripped gold over the fields of Khadipur, a small forgotten village where time seemed to move slower than the wind. The dust rose lazily from the unpaved road, catching in the dying light as a horse cart approached from the west. On it sat a woman in a faded shawl, clutching a small girl no older than 13, her eyes wide, lost, fragile, like someone who'd already known too much sadness for her age. Ayaan, 16 then, stood by the old neem tree watching the cart approach. His father, Maksud, had told him that morning, "Your new mother is coming today, and she's bringing her daughter." Ayaan didn't know how to feel. His own mother had died 5 years earlier. He still remembered her voice, soft as the sound of a distant flute in the night. The thought of another woman in her place felt like betrayal. The cart stopped before their worn mud house. The woman stepped down first. She was thin, her face drawn by years of hardship, but her eyes carried a tired kindness. And then the girl, Saira, followed. Her small sandals touched the ground, and for a moment, her gaze met Ayaan's. Neither spoke, but something wordless passed between them, not understanding, not rejection, but a silent recognition of two lonely souls forced to share one roof. That night the rain came. It didn't pour. It whispered. The sound of droplets on the tin roof was like a lullaby for the brokenhearted. Ayaan couldn't sleep. He sat near the small window, watching the lightning flash across the fields. From the room next door, he could hear Saira crying softly, muffled sobs she was trying to hide. He wanted to go to her, to tell her that he understood, that losing a parent wasn't something you ever stopped feeling. But he didn't. He just sat there, gripping his mother's old scarf, whispering to himself, "She's not my sister." And yet, the days that followed were quiet. Saira would sit by the well every morning, braiding her hair, staring into the water as though searching for something lost inside it. Ayaan watched from a distance. He didn't know why he cared. Maybe it was because her silence mirrored his own. One afternoon, while helping in the fields, he saw her being teased by village boys. They mocked her for being the new girl and for her torn clothes. Before he even realized it, Ayaan had thrown his sickle to the ground and stormed toward them. His voice roared louder than the wind. "Say another word, and I'll bury your laughter right here in this soil." The boys scattered, and Saira looked at him with startled eyes, not from fear, but from something like gratitude. She whispered softly, "Thank you, Ayaan." For the first time, he smiled, not because he wanted to, but because something in her voice made him forget the ache of the past. That evening, he brought her a small clay whistle he had carved as a boy. "When the nights get too quiet," he said, handing it to her, "this will keep the ghosts away." She smiled, a small, trembling smile, and held it as though it were made of gold. But Maksud, Ayaan's father, noticed. He noticed how Ayaan looked at her, how the silence between them had started to feel like a story neither dared to tell. "Remember, Ayaan," he warned one night, his tone heavy with the weight of unspoken rules. "She is your sister now. Treat her as such." Ayaan nodded. But inside, something was already changing, something dangerous, Something fragile. That night, as the moon spilled silver over the quiet fields, Saira sat by the window playing the clay whistle. The sound drifted softly through the air, finding its way to Ayaan's room. He listened, eyes closed, and wondered why the sound made his heart hurt so much. Can love exist where it was never meant to? The question returned again, heavier this time, carried by the whistle's lonely song and the promise of heartbreak that neither of them could yet see. Some silences are louder than love itself. It had been 3 years since that first rain. The village had changed little, but inside the small mud house, everything was different. Saira was 16 now, her eyes older than her age, calm, deep, and always searching. Ayaan had turned 19, taller, broader, and quieter. The childish warmth between them had turned into something else, something neither could name, yet both could feel with every glance, every hesitation, every heartbeat. They worked side by side in the fields now. Sometimes they talked about simple things, the harvest, the goats, the stubborn old cow that refused to eat. But their conversations were never really about the words. They were about what wasn't being said. When Saira laughed, Ayaan pretended to be busy just so he wouldn't have to look at her. When she passed him the water pot, her fingers brushed against his hand just long enough to make his chest ache for reasons he dared not admit. The people of Khadipur had begun to notice. Villages have no walls, and whispers travel faster than wind. She's not really his sister, someone said at the well one morning. But still, such closeness isn't right. The words reached Maksood's ears before the sun had even set that day. He came home furious. Ayaan? The young man stopped in his tracks. Yes, father? Keep your distance from her. You hear me? She's your sister by name, if not by blood. People talk, and talk kills faster than poison. Ayaan didn't answer. His silence was enough. But that night, he didn't eat. He sat outside under the stars, staring at the dark sky that seemed endless, as if it held every forbidden feeling in the world. Saira came out quietly, holding a small bowl of lentils and roti. You didn't eat, she said softly. He didn't look up. Not hungry? She sat beside him anyway, her shawl brushing his arm. The night was cold. Their breath showed like smoke in the moonlight. You shouldn't listen to them, she whispered. It's not them I fear, he said. It's what I might do if I stopped listening. Her eyes lowered. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them throbbed like a pulse. Then faintly, she began humming the same tune she used to play on the clay whistle years ago. He smiled, painfully. You still remember it. I never forgot. Why? Because it sounded like you. The words cut through the air, soft, but sharp enough to leave a scar. That night, Ayaan dreamt of rain. He saw himself standing in the fields, watching Saira run through. The downpour, her dress clinging to her laughter echoing like the sound of bells. He tried to reach her, but the more he ran, the farther she drifted away, until she disappeared into mist. When he woke, his pillow was wet. He told himself it was just a dream. But he knew better. Days turned into months. Their father grew. Older and more tired, spending his time at the mosque or in silence. The weight of unspoken things filled the house. Sometimes Ayaan would find Saira sitting under the neem tree, the same one where he had once waited for her arrival. She would sit there in the evenings, reading from an old torn book their mother had left behind. He would bring her tea and sit beside her. They would talk of dreams, hers of becoming a teacher someday, his of leaving the village to find work in the city. You'll forget me there, she would tease softly. Impossible, he would reply. You're the sound that silence makes. One evening, a storm broke out over Khadipur. The wind screamed through the thatched roofs, and the rain came down like shattered glass. The fields drowned in minutes. Inside the house, a candle flickered weakly between them, as thunder shook the earth. Saira, frightened, moved closer. Ayaan held the candle steady, watching her face glow in the trembling light. Don't be scared, he whispered. I'm not, she said, though her voice trembled. It's just... Everything feels like it's ending. Maybe it's beginning, he said. The thunder answered for them, loud and merciless. She looked at him then, really looked, and in that single gaze, every wall they had built began to crumble. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to stop. The air was thick with the storm and everything unspoken between them. But before anything could be said or done, Maxim's voice echoed from the next room. Ayaan! Close the windows, boy, before the wind takes the roof away. The spell broke. Saira turned away, wiping her eyes quickly. Though she wasn't crying, the next morning she acted as if nothing had happened. She talked, she smiled, she worked, but she avoided his gaze. Ayaan felt the distance growing again, but he didn't know how to stop it. Every time he looked at her, he saw the line they could never cross, the invisible barrier between love and sin. He started spending more time in the fields alone. Saira, too, stayed near the house, helping her mother. But when the sun set, their eyes always found each other, across the courtyard, across the silence, across the years. One evening, while gathering hay, Ayaan found the clay whistle lying half buried in the soil, cracked in half. He picked it up gently, brushing the dirt away, feeling the sting of memories. That night, he left it outside her window, wordlessly. In the morning, it was gone. A week later, Saira left a folded note on the windowsill. The paper was wrinkled, the ink smudged by tears. It read, "Some loves are born only to die quietly." Ayaan read it again and again, until the ink blurred into nothing. He didn't cry. He couldn't. He only whispered to himself, "Then let it die with me." Outside, the rain began again, soft and slow, like the night years ago when she first arrived. The same question came back, heavier than ever. Can love exist where it was never meant to? And in that answerless question, Scene 2 faded, leaving behind only two hearts that beat for each other yet belong nowhere. Some truths are too heavy for love to carry. The monsoon came early that year. The skies over Khadipur stayed heavy for days, gray and swollen, as if the heavens themselves couldn't bear their own secrets anymore. The air smelled of wet earth and sorrow, a smell Ayaan had grown to recognize all too well. It had been months since Saira's note. Some loves are born only to die quietly. He had buried those words in his heart like a wound that refused to heal. But the silence between them had grown unbearable. The small house had turned into a cage of whispers and stolen glances. Every morning, Ayaan would wake to the sound of her footsteps, light and hurried, and every night he would fall asleep to the sound of her soft voice humming somewhere in the dark. One afternoon, when the rain finally broke, Ayaan went out to the fields. The sky was dim, the fields glistening with fresh water. He worked quietly alone, or so he thought. When he looked up, he saw Saira standing by the edge of the field, holding a shawl over her head, rain dripping from her fingertips. "Father's been looking for you," she said softly. "I know," he replied, without looking at her. "Then why are you here?" "Because this is the only place I can breathe." The silence after that was sharp. Saira stepped closer, her feet sinking slightly into the mud. Her eyes searched his face, but he kept his gaze down. "You're not the only one who can't breathe, Ayaan," she whispered. He turned to her then, slow, heavy, like someone turning toward a dream he had tried too long to forget. The rain fell between them, soft but relentless, and for the first time in years, neither looked away. "Why did you write that note?" he asked, his voice raw. "Because it was true. You didn't mean it." "I did." "Because it's better to kill something quietly than to let it die screaming." He took a step closer. "And if it's already screaming?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The rain fell harder, drumming on the earth, drowning out everything except the thunder of two hearts that could no longer pretend. "Saira!" "Don't," she whispered. "Please, Ayaan. If you say it, there's no going back." "Then maybe I don't want to go back." She stared at him, trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of everything unsaid. Then, like the breaking of a dam, tears flooded her eyes. "This isn't love we're allowed to have." Then let it be the one thing we steal from this cruel life. She closed her eyes. And for a brief, suspended moment, they stood inches apart, the world around them dissolving into nothing but rain and breath and silence. Ayaan didn't move closer. He didn't have to. Every emotion they buried came alive in that space between them. The longing, the guilt, the beauty of something that should never have been. Then, like fate itself had been waiting, Maqsood's voice shattered the world. Ayaan, Saira. They froze. He stood at the edge of the field, drenched in rain, eyes wide, not with shock, but with something worse. Betrayal. What is this? His voice thundered through the storm. Is this what I raised you for? Father, silence. Saira stepped back, shaking, her shawl falling into the mud. It's not what you think. Then tell me, girl, what is it that I think? You call him brother, yet look at him like a lover. Ayaan's chest tightened. Stop it, father. Stop. You shame this house, this blood. Ayaan took a step forward. I never asked for this life. You brought her here, and you told me to call her sister. But she is not my blood, and he couldn't finish. The words hung there, broken, bleeding in the rain. Maqsood's hand trembled before it struck Ayaan across the face. The sound cracked like lightning. Enough. The old man roared. From this day, you are no son of mine. Saira cried out, falling to her knees. Please, don't. It's not his fault. Get away from him. Maqsood shouted. Both of you, away from me, away from this house. God will judge what I cannot. The rain swallowed their screams. That night, Ayaan sat beneath the neem tree, the same one where he had watched her arrive years ago. His face was bruised, his soul shattered. Saira came to him quietly, her shawl soaked, her eyes red from crying. I ruined everything, she whispered. No, he said, his voice hollow. It was never ours to keep. Where will you go? Anywhere that doesn't remember you. She knelt beside him, holding his hand in the dark. I wish we'd never met, she said, and then almost immediately, no. I wish we'd met somewhere else, where names didn't matter. The wind howled through the fields. He looked at her, memorizing every detail, the trembling of her lips, the rain on her hair, the way her fingers clung to his, as if holding on to the last piece of the world. If there's another life, he said softly, find me there. And if there isn't, then I'll wait anyway. They sat in silence until dawn broke over the horizon. A pale, gray dawn that felt more like an ending than a beginning. When the first light touched the earth, Saira stood up. She didn't look back as she walked away, her small figure fading into the mist that covered the fields. Ayaan watched until she was gone. Then he whispered the same question that had haunted him for years. Can love exist where it was never meant to? But this time, the answer came in the sound of the wind, the cry of the morning crows, and the emptiness inside him. No, it can exist, but it cannot survive. Sometimes love doesn't end. It just gets buried alive. The monsoon was over, but the village still smelled of rain. The fields were green again, but for Ayaan, everything had turned gray. Since that night in the storm, Maqsood hadn't spoken a single word to him. The air inside their house was colder than the wind outside. Saira kept to her room, her mother rarely letting her out except for chores. When Ayaan crossed her path, she looked away, her eyes heavy with the weight of guilt and love that had nowhere left to go. But in Khadipur, silence never stays private. The whispers that had once floated through the village now came as open gossip, poisonous, cruel, relentless. They say the boy and his stepsister were caught together in the rain. Someone murmured at the well. Shameless, another replied. The father should send her away before the family name is drowned. It didn't take long for those whispers to reach Maqsood's heart, already bruised and hardened by disappointment. He avoided his son, but his anger burned quietly, day after day, until it finally erupted. One evening, Ayaan came home from the fields to find the house unusually silent. His father sat inside, head bowed, a stranger beside him, a man Ayaan didn't recognize, wearing a clean turban and holding a folded paper in his hands. "Who is he?" Ayaan asked. No one answered. He turned to Saira's mother, but she looked down, her lips trembling. Maksud finally spoke, his voice distant. "He's from the next village. His family has agreed to take Saira as a bride." The world tilted. Ayaan's breath caught in his chest. "You can't," he said quietly. "You can't do this." Maksud didn't look at him. "I have no choice. The girl's honor is worth more than your feelings." Ayaan stepped forward, desperate. "She doesn't love him. Enough?" Maksud thundered. "This house has suffered enough shame. Tomorrow morning, she will leave." Saira stood in the doorway, her face pale, her hands clutching the shawl he'd once seen her wear in the rain. Her eyes met his only for a second, and in that second, every word they'd ever left unsaid passed between them. That night, Ayaan couldn't sleep. The walls seemed to whisper, the rain returning only in his mind. He went to the neem tree again, their tree, the one that had witnessed every chapter of their story. The stars were hidden behind clouds, and the wind carried the faint sound of a woman crying from inside the house. He closed his eyes. He wanted to scream, to beg, to run, but his legs wouldn't move. And then, from the darkness, she appeared. Saira. She walked toward him quietly, the hem of her dress brushing through the grass, her face half lit by the moon. "You shouldn't be here," he said, though he couldn't stop looking at her. "Neither should you," she replied softly. They stood beneath the neem tree in silence. The air was still. Somewhere far away, a dog barked, and the sound of a flute drifted from a neighboring field. "They're sending me away tomorrow," she said, her voice trembling. "I know. Do you hate me for not stopping it?" "I could never hate you." "Then what do I do, Ayaan?" "Tell me." He looked at her, really looked, and in that moment she wasn't his stepsister, nor the girl the world had condemned. She was the only truth his heart had ever known. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers trembling. "You do nothing," he said softly. "You live. You survive. You carry me wherever you go. And you? I'll stay here, with what's left of us." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Do you remember the whistle you gave me? Every day." She took it from her pocket, mended with thread, the cracks still visible. "It still sings," she said. "Then promise me you'll play it, wherever you are, so the wind can carry it back to me." She nodded, unable to speak. Then, quietly, she pressed the whistle into his hand. "No," he whispered, pushing it back. "It's yours. Always was." "No," she said, her voice breaking. "It's ours, and I can't carry it anymore." He wanted to tell her he loved her. He wanted to say everything that had burned inside him for years. But instead, he just said, "Go before they find you here." She hesitated. "Will you come tomorrow, when I leave?" "I can't," he said. "If I see you go, I'll follow you, and I can't do that to you." Saira bit her lip, trying to stop the sob that escaped. Then she leaned forward, not to embrace him, but to rest her forehead against his for one fleeting heartbeat. It was the softest touch in the world, and yet it shattered them both. "Goodbye, Ayaan. Goodbye, Saira." She turned and walked away, her figure dissolving into the misty dark. He stood there, motionless, listening until even the sound of her steps disappeared. Then he fell to his knees, clutching the whistle against his chest, his tears mixing with the dirt below Dot. The next morning, the sun rose red and hollow. The courtyard was filled with people, women crying, men murmuring blessings, the groom's cart waiting at the gate. Saira sat inside, veiled, silent. Maksud stood beside her, his face carved from stone. Ayaan watched from a distance, hidden behind the neem tree. When the cart began to move, he stepped forward, just a little, his heart pounding like a drum. But he didn't call her name. He couldn't. The cart rolled away, the dust rising behind it until she vanished completely. And just like that, the village swallowed the last piece of her, and Ayaan was left with nothing but the sound of wind through the trees and the whistle in his hand, silent at last. Sometimes love doesn't end. It just gets buried alive. The years did not arrive all at once. They crept in softly, like dust settling on forgotten things. The neem tree outside the old house grew heavier with age, its branches twisting toward the sky as if in prayer. Beneath it, the earth still remembered the sound of her footsteps. Though no one else did, Ayaan had become a man the village barely noticed. He plowed fields for other people now, speaking little, eating less. Children whispered that he was half mad, a ghost who wandered at night. Perhaps they were right. He no longer felt entirely human, more like an echo that refused to fade. Every morning, he awoke before the sun, because sleep was dangerous. Sleep was where she waited. In dreams, Saira still laughed under the monsoon rain. Her hair stuck to her face, her eyes bright with something that once felt like forever. Then dawn would break, and he would remember. She was gone. Gone far beyond letters, beyond roads, beyond breath itself. When news had first reached him, rumors that her husband's cart had overturned on a flooded bridge, he had not cried. He had simply walked to the neem tree and sat until the sky turned black. The village thought grief had struck him silent. But silence had been his language long before loss found him. Now the fields were his only companions. He spoke to the soil as if it could answer. He planted millet, harvested wheat, and whispered her name into the furrows. "Saira," he would murmur, dragging his hand through the dirt. "Do you feel it where you are? The earth still remembers us." At night, when wind rustled through the reeds, it sounded like her whistle, broken, mended, faint. He kept it wrapped in a piece of old cloth, hidden in the pocket of his waistcoat. Sometimes he pressed it to his lips, but no sound came. Maybe the wind had taken the tune back to her dot, and yet, despite the years, a small part of him still waited. Each evening, when the sun slipped behind the hills, he found himself glancing at the road that led out of Khadipur. Just for a heartbeat, he imagined he might see her figure there walking toward him, shawl fluttering in the dust, eyes carrying both forgiveness and blame, but the road always stayed empty. Ayaan often wondered how time could be both healer and executioner. The seasons passed, but they didn't mend anything. They simply taught him how to endure the pain. He carried it the way old farmers carried their tools. Worn smooth by years of use, when the rains came each year, he avoided the village paths. The smell of wet earth brought too much back. He would take his lantern and sit on the veranda, listening to the drops drum against the tin roof, his mind wandering to the night that had begun it all. That storm had once felt alive, wild, electric. Now, rain only meant memory, an unending circle that began and ended with her name. People in the village spoke to him with pity now. They said his eyes had become empty wells. Some even said he was cursed, paying the price for loving where love was forbidden. Ayaan never argued. Perhaps they were right. Yet what they never understood was that he did not regret loving her. He regretted only that he hadn't said it enough before she was gone. There was a small clay lamp he kept in his room, cracked at the rim. It was hers once, a thing she had made before leaving. On nights when the loneliness became unbearable, he lit it and watched the flame dance, as if she were there, sitting silently beside him. Sometimes he spoke aloud, telling her about the harvest, about how Maksud had grown weak, about how the world had changed. And in the quiet after his words, he imagined she answered. One winter, the old neem tree split during a storm. Half of it fell across the yard, its trunk heavy and hollow. Ayaan took a knife and carved her initials into what remained so small and trembling, as if written by the wind itself. Beneath it, he carved his own. The act gave him no peace, but it made her presence tangible again. Years blurred. Maksud passed away one summer morning, his heart giving up as quietly as a candle flame. The villagers said Ayaan barely spoke at the funeral. He stood beside the grave, rain drizzling down, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the horizon. No tears, no words. Only the faintest whisper carried by the wind. "She's waiting for me." But he did not follow. Not yet. Something in him refused to surrender completely. Every dawn still brought the same quiet ache, but also a strange, fragile hope, an impossible belief that maybe death had not taken her after all. He didn't know where the thought came from. Perhaps from dreams, or perhaps from the way the wind sometimes carried a sound that was too familiar to be chance, a faint whistle note drifting from the hills. Each time he heard it, his heart stumbled. "Saira?" He'd whisper to the air. The air never answered, but it lingered around him, tender and restless, as though it remembered too. One evening, near the end of harvest, Ayaan walked to the edge of the fields where the land met the river. The light was fading fast, and the world was painted in the color of ashes. He came here often now. The river never lied. It only moved forward, carrying everything that once was. He sat on a stone and let his hands trail through the current. The water was cold, alive. He imagined it had passed by her village once. Perhaps it still carried the dust of the road she had taken away from him. "If you see her," he murmured to the stream, "tell her I still wait." The ripples broke against his fingers, answering in their own tongue. That night he dreamt again. Not the usual dreams of rain and laughter, but something quieter. He saw her standing under the neem tree, older, thinner, eyes filled with distance. She said nothing, but she smiled, and when she lifted her hand, he saw the whistle between her fingers whole, shining, as though it had never cracked. He woke to the sound of wind pressing against the window. It wasn't just any wind, it carried a tune, a low, broken whistle that seemed to float from the fields. His chest tightened. For years he had imagined the sound, but tonight it was real. He stepped outside barefoot, the ground cool beneath him, the moon bright and sharp. The field swayed like a sea of silver. He followed the sound through the stalks until he reached the old neem stump. The wind grew softer there, curling around him like a memory made of breath. He waited, heart hammering, every sense awake. But the night offered no figure, no whisper, only the echo of that fragile note fading into silence. Still, something inside him shifted. The sound might have been a trick of wind and loneliness, yet it felt like permission to hope again. For the first time in years, he thought maybe she had not died at all. Maybe the story he had believed, the cart, the bridge, the flood had been just another rumor the world told to bury its guilt. The thought frightened him. Hope was dangerous. Hope meant waking from survival and learning to ache again. But as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, he found himself whispering, "If you're alive, Saira, find me." The words hung in the air, fragile and absurd, but the wind seemed to catch them, carrying them away toward the hills. And from that morning on, Ayaan began to live differently, not quite alive, not quite dead, caught between memory and possibility. He went to the fields earlier, watched the road longer, and every night, before sleep took him, he placed the old whistle beside his pillow, as if it were a signal light waiting to be seen. He could not sit still after that night. The trader's words circled his mind until they turned into thunder. Every shadow seemed to whisper her name. The house felt smaller than ever, walls closing in around memories that had already begun to fade. Just before midnight, Ayaan rose from his charpoy. He did not light a lamp. The moon was enough. He gathered what little he owned, an old shawl, a water skin, a few coins, and tucked the cracked whistle into the inner pocket of his waistcoat. His hands shook, not from fear but from the strange, unbearable excitement of hope reborn. Outside, the field shimmered with dew. The road stretched pale under the stars, the same road that had once taken her away. He hesitated only once, glancing back at the neem stump. "Forgive me," he whispered to the house, to his father's grave, to the silence that had been his companion for years. Then he began to walk. The night air cut sharp against his skin. He walked past sleeping huts, past the well, past the old shrine at the edge of the village. Dogs barked, then fell silent. Somewhere a rooster cried too early. Ayaan didn't care. His feet moved as if they had waited their whole life for this path. When he reached the ridge beyond the fields, He turned once more. Khadipur lay behind him, dark, small, peaceful, and utterly empty. Ahead, the road slipped in the mist. He thought of the trader's words. She worked near Rahimpur. She said she would return when the roads were kind again. The roads are kind tonight. He murmured die. He started running then, not fast, but steady, like a man chasing the echo of a life he had lost. The wind rose around him, carrying the scent of rain and distant firewood. It sounded, for a moment, like laughter hers, bright and sudden, the way it had been years ago beneath the monsoon. He smiled through tears he didn't remember starting. I'm coming, Saira, he said into the dark. This time, I won't be too late. The stars above him blurred as he walked into the unknown, the whistle warm against his chest. Behind him, the first light of dawn touched the fields, and the neem leaves rustled softly, as if wishing him luck. The journey to Rahimpur took 3 days on foot. The road was longer than Ayaan remembered, each mile filled with ghosts of what-ifs. He slept by roadside shrines, drank from wells, and walked until his feet bled through his sandals. Yet, for the first time in years, his pain had a direction. By the 4th dawn, he saw the village-low mud houses wrapped around a river bend, smoke rising from clay chimneys. Children ran along the bank chasing buffalo, and the smell of tamarind drifted through the mist. Rahimpur looked ordinary, peaceful, like the kind of place where a lost soul might hide. He found the school first. Its whitewashed walls were cracked and streaked with soot. A woman sweeping the veranda looked up as he approached. Mother, he asked quietly, was there a woman here once named Saira? She taught the children to read. The broom paused midair. The woman frowned, thinking. Yes, she said after a long moment. A gentle one, with eyes like monsoon clouds. She left us some months ago. Ayaan's pulse quickened. Left? Where did she go? The woman shook her head. She fell ill when the rains came. Fever. We tried to help her, but... Her voice trailed off. Her eyes softened with pity. I'm sorry, son. She passed. The schoolmaster buried her by the old banyan near the river. The world swayed. For a heartbeat, he couldn't breathe. He had walked so far, carried so much hope, only to arrive a season too late. Did she say anything? About Khadipur? About me? The woman hesitated, then nodded toward the doorway. The master keeps her things. Maybe he'll know. Ayaan found the schoolmaster sitting at a desk stacked with slates and inkpots. The old man looked up, eyes tired but kind. You must be the one she spoke of, he said softly, before Ayaan could speak. She asked me to give you this if ever you came. From a drawer he pulled a small cloth bundle. Inside lay a folded letter, its edges browned by time, and a familiar silver bangle shaped like a leaf. The sight of it undid Ayaan completely. He sat down, trembling, as the master left him alone with the past. He opened the letter carefully. The paper smelled faintly of smoke and rain. My Ayaan, if you are reading this, then the world has been kinder than I deserved. I do not know if I am alive when you find these words, but I want you to know I never stopped waiting. Every road I walked, I looked for your shadow. Every time the wind moved through the fields, I listened for your whistle. I tried to return, but life has its own fences. My husband passed early. After that, I had no place but this small school, and my health would not let me travel. Tell the neem tree that I kept my promise. I played the whistle until it broke again. When it stopped singing, I knew it was time to rest. Do not come searching, my dearest. You have already lived too long in sorrow. Let my memory fade gently, like rain on stone. Yours always. Saira read it twice, then a third time, each word carving deeper into him. Outside, children laughed somewhere, their voices bright against the quiet hum of afternoon. He folded the letter and pressed it to his chest. 4. The first time, he cried without shame-loud, raw sobs that emptied him of everything but her name. Later, he walked to the river. The banyan stood just as she'd written, roots dipping into the water, its leaves whispering secrets to the current. A small mound of earth lay beneath it, marked with a stone and her name scratched faintly across it. He knelt and placed the bangle atop the grave. The river murmured beside him. "I found you," he whispered. "And you found peace." The wind rose, carrying dust and the faintest trace of a melody, 3 soft notes, the ghost of a whistle. He looked up, eyes blurred with tears, and smiled. "She kept her promise," he said, "and so will I." He stayed there until the sun sank and the river turned gold. Then he stood, feeling older and somehow lighter, as though part of her had slipped into him through the air. When he left Rahimpur that night, he didn't look back. He carried the letter close to his heart, its words beating in rhythm with his own, guiding him home to whatever waited in the final chapter of their story. The journey back to Khadipur was slower than the one that had taken him away. Ayaan no longer walked with hope in his steps, only the heavy rhythm of a man moving, because stopping would mean breaking. The roads were the same, but they looked older now, as if time itself had grown weary. He reached the village at dusk. The sky hung low and red, and the air smelled of dust and dying grass. Children were still playing near the well, their laughter thin and far away. None of them knew him anymore. To them, he was just another traveler, a man with gray in his beard and silence in his eyes. His old house stood exactly where he'd left it, though the walls had begun to crumble. The neem tree outside had grown broader, its branches reaching like arms trying to comfort the empty yard. Ayaan stood there for a long time, staring at the door, unsure whether to enter or turn away. When he finally stepped inside, the air was thick with the smell of earth and memory. The mat on which he and Saira had once sat, shelling peas and laughing, was gone. Dust covered the floor. He lowered himself to the ground, pulled the letter from his chest, and read it once more by the fading light. "Tell the neem tree I kept my promise," she had written. He lifted his eyes toward the window. The neem leaves shimmered faintly in the last rays of sun, and for a fleeting second, he thought he saw her there standing under the branches, her dupatta fluttering, her eyes soft as they once had been. But when he blinked, there was only the wind. Night came slowly. He lit a small oil lamp, though its flame trembled like his own breath. He placed the letter beneath the window and set the broken whistle beside it. Then he sat in silence, staring at the light until it blurred into a haze. Days passed, then weeks. The villagers whispered about the old man who rarely spoke and walked every evening to the edge of the fields. They said he talked to the wind, that sometimes he smiled at nothing. Children followed him once, curious, and found him sitting beneath the neem tree, humming softly to himself. In his lap lay the silver bangle he had retrieved from the grave. He would polish it with the edge of his shawl, whisper something, and then tuck it back close to his heart. Seasons turned. The rains came again, flooding the paths, drenching the roofs. Ayaan watched the water flow through the fields where they had once run barefoot. He thought of her laughter, of her face turning upward to catch raindrops. He pressed the whistle to his lips, but it made no sound now, just a hollow breath. A ghost of a melody. The years stole his strength, but not his memory. Each morning he would rise, sit by the neem tree, and wait for the dawn to break. The villagers grew used to the sight of him thin, bent, eyes lost somewhere far beyond the horizon. No one disturbed him. It was as if he lived in another time entirely, one that ran parallel to theirs but never touched it. One cold evening, when the wind carried the scent of distant rain again, Ayaan did not return from the fields. They found him the next morning, sitting upright beneath the neem, his head tilted slightly back, his eyes half open as if he were still listening. In his hand was the letter, edges worn soft from years of being unfolded and refolded. The whistle hung from his neck, the bangle resting in his palm. They buried him beside the tree, next to where his father's grave had once been. For a long time after, the villagers said that on certain nights, when the wind was just right, you could hear faint music near the neem 3 soft notes, rising and falling like a heartbeat, and some swore they saw 2 figures walking through the mist there, a young man and woman, side by side, disappearing just before dawn. In the end, Ayaan and Saira's story becomes a haunting echo of love bound by time and silence. They were never meant to be together in life, yet their souls remain entwined beyond death. Years of distance, regret, and unspoken feelings shaped their fates, one waiting under a distant sky, the other chasing her memory until his last breath. Ayaan's return to Khadipur closed the circle. His life faded where their love had begun, beneath the same neem tree that had witnessed their laughter. Though sorrow consumed him, it also kept her alive in his heart. And when the wind carries the faint notes of a whistle through the fields, the villagers still believe it is them, walking side by side, free at last in the place where love never truly died.